the government is there to govern, and I think sometimes we've put to the government roles that it probably shouldn't actually be doing.
Yep.
And I think I
thoroughly agree with that.
And then we're quick to blame and criticise the government when they don't fix it or they don't solve it. And I go, is that a role that government actually should be doing? And I think we've got to be fair to the system and go, hang on, guys, let's have a relook and think about this. Are there other sectors in society, in the community, that are better set up to actually do the role that is required here?
It's Radio Australia. It's Malloy with you, falling over his tongue with great excitement because I am ready for the greater wealth, mate. Are you ready? Derek Whittaker, the man who's got Blu Sky Factory, mate. You've got your finger on the pulse of all of this sort of stuff. So where are we going first?
We've got a big budget broadcast today, mate. How do you like that?
Oh, it's almost like he stole that little term from the mainstream media.
Well,
mate,
it's a compliment. It's a compliment. It's that good. I'm copying it, eh? I just love alliteration.
Oh, it is magic. It is absolutely magic, mate. If that's the word we're going to use for this one, never mind. One of our majors is calling this again. Tell me what it was. Come on.
The big budget broadcast.
Oh, I'll tell you right now. Cancel your plans. This is your weekend. I know it's only Monday, but be ready for it. All right. Now, apart from the fact that so much has already been dropped about this already, that we pretty well know what's in there. I mean, look, we knew what was in there when we knew that Chalmers was the treasurer. Yeah. We knew it was going to be useless. So, and not actually solve any problems or do anything positive for the world, or certainly not Australia. So we will jump into it and thank our wonderful guests who are in the background, who are leaving, sending lots and lots of love their way. It's great having the peanut gallery, but it's sad to see them go.
Absolutely.
All right, mate. Let's jump into it anyway. Let's talk about this.
I think people are really concerned about interest rates.
Okay. Well, you think so, right?
That's what's on everybody's mind. Are they going to get relief on their mortgage and this sort of stuff? And I think what the right wing media are coming out, or the right leaning media, I shouldn't say right wing, right leaning media are starting to say is that, look, this is not going to solve budget cuts because what's happening is the government expenditure on this budget is just going to push it and hold it. My thought on that is that they've got to save enough buffer for a rainy day. So if things turn really bad globally in the economy, that they can reduce rates that way to allow a bit of buffer in the economy to go, hey, we are doing something about that. And we can artificially try to stimulate the economy because we're lowering our interest rates. Now, what people need to realize is the mechanics of that. So if they don't want you to spend more money, they raise interest rates. And that's what the Reserve Bank has been doing, is because the more money is spent on paying back your mortgages and loans, less money you have for surplus spending.
Sure.
That's what's been going on. If they want you to spend more, they lower interest rates and that stimulates an economy. And that's kind of the lever they've been pulling for decades now when it comes to this. So if things get really ugly on the big global front, they've got to have some buffer to be able to go down. And that's kind of how I look at it from my perspective.
Well, on that buffer front, and you could probably explain this to me better than I would certainly understand. When I was growing up, I was told by somebody who's much smarter than I when it comes to finances that in Australia, effectively our zero mark was really 3%. Because of the way we fitted into the world market. So I remember when a few years ago, interest rates dropped, and they got down to 3%, and no problem. I thought, well, that's our zero. Okay, that's the maximum stimulus we can get, but we didn't. They moved that limbo down, and we kept going. So, I mean, is that still a realistic buffer, or is that a hangover kind of thought from pre-deregulation of the banking market?
Well, it's Australia. I was taught in financial planning school that 3% is kind of the target market for Australia. Okay. America's kind of 2 to 3% sort of thing from what I'm picking up. And that is the reason for that is investors like a bit of inflation, right? You buy a house, you want that value in the property to go up. So you've got equity going up in terms of that asset. So that's kind of the way it's worked. Can it go lower? Absolutely. And look at the circumstances that they did. They went crazy on the credit card when that cold came through, that cold-19 came through. That had to be squashed. And so they just went nuts, the government, on public spending on this. And what you had, you're locking people down. They weren't being productive. So the economy was slowing down. You had artificial stimulus going into that with help and relief for some business owners. Of what I think the ones who copped it the most is probably the landlords of property.
Sure.
Because those rules came in, hey, we're going to protect the renter here. And a lot of landlords don't have a lot of rights. The renter does have more rights.
It's quite surprising.
The landlord. And then you had further, well, if they can't pay, you can't kick them out. And it's like, well, the bank's not going to give that much leniency when it comes to paying back your interest rates on that property. So you could effectively be paying multiple mortgages if you were a landlord in that situation.
And that's what happened. Let's be real. That happened to a lot of people.
So I think it's a bit. It was knee-jerk type of reaction in some ways, and people hit panic mode, and we're paying the cost for that now. And the problem is when you start to keep spending, and not intend to pay that back, and just keep spending. Well, the interest rates, they don't want to reduce the interest rates. The Reserve Bank wants to be paid back what it's loaned out to the country. So it's an interesting mess that we've got here, particularly with housing as well.
Well, our interest rates, they seem to be, certainly when the government that we've seen, well, actually the last couple of governments, it seems to be their only lever, to control spending and all that kind of thing. Okay, surely there's other mechanisms.
There are, and they've tried to put in migration to stimulate business, but the problem is they didn't have the houses to put the migrants in.
That's right.
And this is why property prices have gone crazy lately, and rents have gone crazy lately, because you've artificially inflated it by letting all these it's supply and demand, and the market's responded this way, going, right, well, the shortage of houses, I'm going to charge more for my house.
That's right.
And then people are desperate to get into houses, so they're offering well more than the asking price of what properties are being advertised. And you're getting into situations where you'll have a viewing and there'll be 60 people rocking up and 12 offers on the table for that property. Right. I've seen that happen.
Yeah, it's very real.
So, it's a problem that they've created, and I don't think they know how to fix it.
Well, again, this comes down to things we've talked about before, the bureaucratic level of Australia. These people have never had real jobs. I see people like Chalmers, and I think, what have you done? Like, honestly, what have you done in the real world? I look at Albanese. You've just been a professional politician all your life. You've never run a business. You don't understand the ins and outs of it. You just understand that side of things. And I think that these people are. It is ridiculous. We are letting our country be run by people who are not qualified for the job. You wouldn't, look, if you were a business, and you've got applicants coming along, right? And they said, oh, well, I've never worked for a business before, but, you sell fruit and veg. Oh, yeah, well, look, I grew a tomato plant one day. Oh, well, that'll do. Like, that's how stupid this is. It really is. And I think there needs to be more, I think, how do you get people out of industry and free enterprise and move into, politics?
Well, I think big government has kind of been the leaning of the left, and I think if you want to cut the fat, look at all the government departments that we have here and go, how much is this overblown? Now, public servants aren't going to like that kind of rhetoric, but as a business owner, I can tell you, I've witnessed a situation where somebody has applied for a grant to do a particular thing that the government does offer. That application process has taken a period of 6 months and it's still not done.
Ridiculous.
And the government has said it's only for $2,000. And in my estimation, I look at that and I go, it's probably cost about 20 grand to process that application. So the inefficiencies of that system is just really apparent. When you run a business, you run it tight, you run it lean. And you look at the government sector and you go, you're not set up that way to do that because you're overblown from day one.
Well, it's not even the case of set up. Well, you're right. Obviously it isn't set up that way, but the mentality is wrong. The mentality, the whole place they come from, it is so far away from cutting the fat. And I think myself, I've had to pay some nasty bills over the last couple of weeks, when it comes to the broadcasting side of things. And I think, how many departments do I have to effectively pay off here, right, to do what we need to do? Like, it is ridiculous. So you make these payments and then, but I had a moment of I thought to myself, what do I receive in return? Do these people offer me a service? No, they don't. There is nothing. So most of these bureaucratic departments are just, all they do is stamp, 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 stamp. They actually offer the businesses, private sector, there is no value for money.
Well, I think the private sector gets frustrated when they see when this kind of situation I've just described takes so long to process. But at the same time, on the flip side of that, when they're wanting money from the private sector, as in tax and that sort of stuff, there's no wait period, there's no mercy, there is no lenience whatsoever. Very little. There is some in some situations, but very little. And it's like, it has to be done by this date. boom, or this is going to occur, and it can be ruthless.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what the frustration of the private sector is. We're stimulating the economy. We're the ones taking all the risk in terms of employing people, in terms of being productive and producing an industry, and we're treated like that, like the public sector, who simply just want to take, and then put big demands on them. I think the private sector, the business owners, are frustrated by that.
We are treated with contempt. And I do notice we've just had Josh come on board. Great to see you, mate. G'day as well. Really great to have you on board, mate. And in fact, I'd really love your questions from there. We don't have Travis with us today, so we're doing the old typing, but I can see the screen. So if you have any questions, we'd love to put those forward, or discussion points as well. But yeah, look, exactly right. There's such a disconnect, and the government is so quick to want from taxpayers, to want from business owners, but so slow to return anything.
There's 20. The Australian government has 20 portfolio departments, right? This is the federal, and this is not counting the state departments, and then we're not concluding the local departments, right? So everybody wants a cut of the pie, right? If you have a house, they want to charge rates on the local level, right? For the bin collections and all this sort of stuff, and then you get crazy spending where they're grading you on if you're recycling really well in your bins and at home, and you go, why is the government spending money on that? You know, this is just crazy.
It is absolutely crazy.
Silly spending. It's like you've got too much time in your hands. Then you've got the state taxes, and anybody who's tried to do a development or do an improvement in their home can testify to the frustrations they have in terms of all the hoops they've got to do just to get permission to do something. And then you've got the federal departments. And I think Australians are getting to the point where you're going, if you want to cut efficiencies, well, we've got to look at making it more efficient. And that is sometimes getting rid of a lot of the red tape.
Well, exactly. And there's red tape, and there's green tape, there's black tape, and what other tape have we got here? Honestly, I feel like I've been abducted with gaffer tape. This is just, it is over the top at every level. And we've got this budget coming out, and we've got, where we're going to have, basically, let's cut the crap, right? They're not doing what needs to be done. They're not going to be stimulating the economy in a way that brings interest rates down and takes this financial pressure off renters and homeowners, right? Which is absolutely the quality.
Well, they caused the problem in the first place. This is the issue.
Why would they solve it?
You can't come out and admit that, because you lose face if you do. Guys, we stuffed up. We let too many migrants in too short a period of time. Why did they do that? And I think that's the question that's got to be asked.
Well, okay, and it can be answered, to the Australian public. The answer is that the Labor Party have imported voters. That's what they've done. Where the stimulus of bringing people in from these countries is not actually to improve the economy. It is actually to create voters. That's what they're doing. All they're doing is they build up their base. They do it every single time. This is like, it's so repetitive. And I'm not saying the other side are any better, right? But like I'm saying, this is a pattern. We have seen it for 40 years, probably more, I don't know. So it's the way that you, as a citizen, as a voter, the way that you act is you do your research on everybody who's a politician, right? You find out what they stand for. You find out what the rules of the party are. I mean, in the case of the Labor Party, people aren't allowed to cross the floor. They're not allowed to have a conscious vote. All of that.
They're socialists. They admit it in their the social democratic.
That's right. The first couple of lines of the damn thing.
Article 4.
It stands pretty tall. So, this is the thing. People need to make that decision when they're there in that little box. And we're 12 months away from being in that little box, marking the numbers again. And I'm not saying go and vote for, the Liberal Party. I'm saying or for that matter, I'm not even saying any particular party. I'm saying go and vote for the person that serves you.
I think what you got to realize too is that obviously the Liberal traditionally has been the one that comes in and cuts the budgets, right?
Yes.
And fixes what the Labor has done.
Yep.
To the point where we cut, and then traditionally after 2-3 years of that, about 2 or 3 elections of that, then people go, right, we want to change now. We want some surplus coming in and that sort of stuff. So there is, I think over time there is a balance between those kind of policies of being a little more, shall we say, charitable in terms of help.
Communist.
Yeah. I was being diplomatic.
I know, and look, and I appreciate that. And like I'm a swing voter, so I'm not nailed onto either party or any party, right? I vote for whoever serves me and the best for Australia at the time. So, I have voted Labor. I make the jokes about Labor, but I mean, the jokes that I make about Labor is because I'm looking right now at the absolute destruction of this beautiful country, this country that means so much to me. I'm seeing the destruction, and I'm seeing those who are in charge of making that happen. And it is the Australian Labor Party, right? And they are so controlled by their leftist socialists behind the scenes that, idiots like Albanese can get up there and say the most ridiculous, egregious things.
Many could say that the previous government was part of the responsibility of getting us in so much debt as well.
Totally agree.
Right?
Totally agree.
In terms of that. So I don't think it's just one or the other. I think some people have come to the point where they're both put in the same pool, and it doesn't matter whether you vote Labor or Liberal, you're going to get the same politicians.
A left wing and a right wing of the same bird.
And what you're getting is that Liberals gone from being right to being very centre.
Yep.
And where is the distinction there? And I think in states like Western Australia, it's really muddied what they stand for now. They've got a huge branding problem.
Okay. So in WA, it's very, very clear. West Australia, we have a Labor Party that is just left-wing halfwits, right? Okay. And we have a completely lost Liberal Party that has no leadership. Right, because they've got no leadership, absolutely none. I see a point there from Josh. Now, you should vote for whoever will serve Australia in the future. Short-term terms in office lead to short-sighted policy. Sorry, mate, it's a long way away. I'm having trouble reading it, but you're absolutely right. When you're only electing people for 3 and 4 years, you are getting very, very short-sighted policy, because they are just really making policy so that they can get themselves in again.
Well, that's politics 101.
Exactly.
It really is. I mean, and that's the problem with the system. And I think, I don't know if there's a way that government can go, hey guys, we realize that we're making a policy that will just get us into the next election, but we want to do a 5-year policy, or we want to do a 10-year policy. And if we're not around in that situation, this is what we're planning. And we're seeing that with the phase 3 of the rollout of taxes.
Tax cuts,
that were done by the Liberals originally and has been adopted by the Labor Party who've gotten that. And that's legislation that I think is actually better for the private sector and individuals in terms of lowering taxes and making it more efficient to do business.
So I thoroughly agree. And that did get watered down, obviously, which was, and this is the thing, when we ran into the election, okay, Albanese and his other socialists said straight outright that they weren't going to change those tax cuts, and they did. So they broke an election promise, right? And he got in his 33%. How many of those people thought, well, okay, you know what, we're sick of Morrison. Morrison is this narcissistic, bloody, self-centered individual, right? We've had enough of him in his lives, because that's certainly how a lot of Australia saw him. So it's time for a fresh one.
Well, certainly the amount of portfolios he may have been controlling, there was a big concern. And an eye opener after he left office, that many Australians said, well, what's actually been going on? I think that's during a pandemic. I think that came into the light.
I agree. He was exposed for the fact of the absolute megalomaniac that he is, right? But then you replace a megalomaniac with this weak puppet, that somebody who basically, if you go, oh, look at that, I'm pointing towards this helmet right now that's in front of me. Now, clearly that's red. Now, if Albanese is sitting next to me and I told him that is blue, the man's going to say it's blue, because he's so weak. He just follows whatever the narrative of what he's being told. This is, again, we've got a country here that needs a longer term plan, and when you've got someone who will flip that easily, this is my opinion. This is not in any way. Look, I'm not even going to sit here for 1 second and pretend to be balanced on this, because I see.
At least you're honest about it.
Yeah. Look, this is my opinion, right? Okay, I'm not a journalist. I'm a guy with a loud mouth, right? Now, my opinion is that right now we are seeing so much damage done to this country socially and financially. When a little girl comes home, this is really, and I know this is not finance, but this is social policy, right? Makes me very angry. When a little girl comes home with a card for her mother, okay, that says Happy Special Persons Day, I'm sorry, whoever facilitated that does not deserve to be in office. You know what? Mother's Day is a time where we actually celebrate the wonderful human beings that bring us into the world and nurture us and so forth. You show them the respect. And the fact that they even outsource that to an English company, that the literature coming up. No, you know what? Teach my kids how to read and write and do their maths. Do not teach them how to interact with other human beings, and do not rewrite biology.
Certainly the politics in education is a huge concern.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're seeing, I was reading an article from the SBS, which of course is a government funded broadcaster as well, blaming Andrew Tate for responses in young boys and how they disrupt schools. And I think it's too easy to point the finger. And I think you've got to realize what are the seeds that we've sown over the years. And that's the problem that we've got, right?
So true.
In the education system is that this has been going on for a long time. You can't blame it on some overseas social media influencer that is influencing the minds. Because why are kids reacting this way, right? When can we get back to reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? And arts? And can we drop the activism and politics on our children? And this is, I think, where a lot of parents are very, very concerned.
Totally agree.
Have pulled their children out. We saw this in 2020 when the Premier said, right, kids are going to have to return to school with face masks on. I said, oh boy, to my wife, I said, you've just woken up Mama Bear. And we had a huge pull out of kids out of school, going into homeschooling and this sort of stuff, and rightly deserved, I think. Now, whether those parents have sustained those homeschooling practices over this period of time, I don't know. But you're seeing parents very concerned about the education system and the indoctrination of their kids. And that's not what schools should be about.
But this is, again, like we often, this show is very much about, the politics and how finance they cross over. Now, this is how it's crossing over. Okay, you're using politics to control the financial situation. You're talking about family tax benefits, all that sort of carry on. You're using this to socially change the fabric of our society, and using money as a tool, particularly to people who don't have it. It's abuse. Because I'll tell you right now, if I was married, right. I'm not going to be that stupid ever again. But if I was married, okay, and I said to my wife, okay, you can't do that, or I'm not going to give you money to buy this or whatever, it's considered to be financial abuse. So when we've got our government doing the exact same thing, why am I not able to go, oh, hang on, I want to talk to the minister in charge of education because he's just domestically abused me? Because that's what it is. It's the same thing. You know what? You can't be a hypocrite. You can't have it in both camps. You're using money to control people, and the less money, and right now when we're talking about a world where people are struggling financially so much, that little morsel of money is ultimate control.
Well, again, it's coming out of the system, the Babylonian system, and saying, hey, I'm going to be financially independent. I'm going to also be educationally and health dependent as well, because it's on so many different areas of life. I have certainly seen my wife empower herself with the research she does in the health area, and I've benefited from that. She does the health stuff, I do the financial stuff, and we compare notes.
Good combination.
It works. And I think that's what you need is how far you got to go, because that's where the power is. When you go, I'm not dependent on the handout from the government.
Yes.
You go, I don't care. You can pull something, you can pull a grant. I don't care. I'm not going to compromise my beliefs because of a handout. Well, I think that's where we've got to get to. But at the heart of it, I mean, that's great in terms of, I'm marginalising to do this, but at the heart of it, it doesn't address the real issue, and that is public servants need to serve the public again. Public monies need to serve the public again.
Yes.
And it's not. And I think there's a lot of people who are feeling that way.
It's been flipped, mate. The public servant is not a public servant anymore. The moment, like whenever I talk to a public servant or email or whatever the case may be now, right, my communications, I am always treated with contempt. Right, I'm always talked down to. I've noticed this. Right, they feel this power over you, and I've absolutely had enough of it. Your house, your mortgage, your rent, your car. Guess who's paying for it, mate? Right, and we've got to swap this around. Bureaucrats and politicians have got to realise again where their wages come from. Yeah, got a comment there. There we go. Public servants, see themselves as our rulers, and I completely agree with that. Above that, we've got politics these days. is done by opinion poll anyway. We should just get rid of the politicians and have an app for each of us to propose and vote on the issues. Direct democracy. You know what the Australian Idol kind of version of democracy, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's attached to a 1-800 number. I can't disagree there. I mean, that's a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah. You just got to be careful how many people download that app.
That's right. And what ID will you need to get the app?
It's a great idea. Explore it further. And I'm not knocking the idea. That's how I assess business ideas. I see that and then the problems, and then I go, okay, well, what are the solutions?
Yeah, but that's how you build.
Yeah.
Right. If you go into something, everything, whether it be a business, whether it be policy, right? What you've got to look at, whether it be a child's name that you're naming your kid, you've got to look at it and go, okay, what are the positives here and what are the negatives? Now, the negatives, if I call my kid this in primary school, he's going to get teased, right? Okay, so I've got to come up with a name that doesn't get teased. If I'm going to make public policy, okay, it's going to benefit these people, but okay, who is it going to hurt along the path, right? Who is, and also if you're making policy, financial policy, political policy, whatever, is ultimately, okay, who's going to exploit it and how will it be exploited? You must look forward. You can't just go, that helps X, Y, Z, a number of people. You've got to look at the long-term benefits and negatives.
It's interesting when managing other people's money. There's two extreme attitudes. There's some that do it very carefully, very responsibly, and probably don't take enough risk at times. You can have that extreme. But I think that's probably the site that's the one I'd go is probably preferable, as opposed to the other extreme. You go, it's public money, who cares? We'll just raise more by taxing them more and that sort of stuff. Let's splash it around. And I think I've certainly come to a point in my life where you're going, don't neglect even the smallest spend. Every dollar is valuable. No matter how many zeros you've used and seen over your lifetime. Don't waste it. Don't let it slip through your fingers easily. And I think with public monies, we've got to be have the same sort of attitude towards it.
I remember that, my mum used to say, I remember my mum said to me once, look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves, right? Those small details, okay, that little costs can obviously, become very, very big. But you can't just throw, you can't just look at the bigger picture. I'm putting that badly. You have to look at those little costs and how they add up and the entire thing from a financial level. You can't just look at the big numbers and go, that's going to work, right? This is a thing that politics do, right? They throw numbers at problems rather than solutions.
I think too, in fairness to politicians, they can't solve every problem, right? There are certain things like the private sector needs to create more solutions. That's what it does. It innovates. The wonderful whole thing of
right now, so go on.
The whole thing of entrepreneurship really needs to be celebrated and recognized for that. I think also, there's things that, like for example, the church should solve different issues that government seems to want to do. For example, welfare, right? The church is really good at welfare. Right. It can be very, very efficient. I've heard of some churches that are supplying, tons and tons of food every year to people who are struggling and doing it tough. Right.
Yeah.
And I think they are set up to do that, whereas government is not really there. The government is there to govern. And I think sometimes we've put to the government roles that it probably shouldn't actually be doing.
Yep.
And I think I
thoroughly agree with that.
And then we're quick to blame and criticize the government when they don't fix it or they don't solve it. And I go, is that a role that government actually should be doing? And I think we've got to be fair to the system and go, hang on, guys, let's have a relook and think about this. Are there other sectors in society, in the community, that are better set up to actually do the role that isn't required here?
Thoroughly agree.